Hi everyone, and welcome back to another video on my channel. For those of you who are new here, I really hope that what you're about to see inspires you somehow. Today I will show you guys how I created this futuristic augmented reality shopping experience using After Effects and Cinema 4D. So sit tight and let's get into the video. First, open Adobe After Effects and start by importing your footage. Make sure you memorize the properties of your footage, mainly the resolution and frame rate, as we're going to need that later on. Now, if you'd like to practice, you can certainly get hold of this project file along with this clip you see right here directly from my Patreon page for a very small fee. If you wish to start from scratch and record your own video, just make sure that whatever surface or device you're shooting has enough texture on it, which will help with the camera tracking later on. Now let's drag the clip over here to create a new composition. I've already cut my footage down to my preferred section before importing, so the first thing I'm gonna need to do now is go to Effects, search for 3D camera tracker, apply it on my clip, and wait for it to process. The camera tracker is going to scan the entire duration of my clip, generating tracking data which I can use to create a virtual camera and eventually place 3D objects anywhere in my scene. The process usually takes a short while, and once it's over, a bunch of colorful tracking points will show up in the frame. Each of these tracking points has its own unique coordinates in 3D space, and in case you still don't see any of these points, make sure the effect is selected and you can increase their size right here for better visibility. Now, if you hover between these points, a red circle will appear connecting 3 tracking points each time. Let's look for a connection that's somewhat parallel to the surface of my phone, something like this. Click one time to select it. Now right click and choose Create Solid and Camera. And now we have a new solid that follows the exact same position of the phone, and you will also notice that a new 3D camera layer has been created as well. Before moving any further, you can resize the track solid and change its orientation to match it to the screen. Next, go to Composition Settings and make sure that your start time code is set to 0 and click OK. Then go to File, Export, and find Maxon Cinema 4D Exporter. Click OK, pick a destination. I'm gonna stick with the default name here and hit save. So now we have a new Cinema 4D file, and as soon as you open the project and check the objects, you will find that the same track solid and camera has been exported inside the project. The settings look fine. The frame rate is set to 25, which matches my composition in After Effects, so all good. And if you press play, you will notice that the camera already has the same motion data here as well. Now, I'd like to mention that I'm relatively new to Cinema 4D and still have a lot to learn. That being said, I really appreciate the number of requests that I received to make this tutorial on both Reddit and Instagram. I will do my best to keep this part as clear and as simple as possible. I'll also leave some video resources in the description below for you guys in case you want to dive deeper into the techniques that I'm going to use today. Right, now to make things easier, let me go ahead and display my footage here in Cinema 4D. Go over here and create a background object. Next, go to Create, Standard Material. Let's double click on the material name and change it to video. Double click to open the material editor. First, disable everything except for luminance, and let's load the same original footage. You can click no here and then add the new material to your background object. And as you can see now, we have the video playing in the background inside Cinema 4D. I'm just gonna go over here real quick and disable the workspace grid as it's a bit distracting. So now we're ready to bring a 3D model in. Go to Window and look for Sketchfab Importer. Now be aware that you won't have this by default in your Cinema 4D. You will need to download the plugin from Sketchfab. So I will leave a link to that down in the description below for you guys to grab it. You can either use the importer or visit the Sketchfab store to browse through thousands of high quality 3D models There's a lot of free options to choose from, as well as a variety of premium ones. I highly recommend checking them out. If you're in need of any 3D model to use in pretty much any software, Sketchfab certainly has it. And if you do like any of their paid models, you can use my custom code MDMZ20 so you can get 20% off of your purchase. And if you've already got one of their premium models, you can simply connect your Sketchfab account and access your library directly from Cinema 4D. I have already bought this model right here, so let me open that. Click on import. It's gonna take a couple of seconds to load. And by the way guys, if you do plan to get the project files from my Patreon page, please note that for licensing reasons, I will be providing a different shoe model inside the package. But of course, you can import any model of your choice. There's all kind of options on Sketchfab, so get creative. Alright, great. Now the model has been imported and added to the objects list, but we still can't see it anywhere in the scene. So let's go ahead and fix that. First, move the Nike shoe or whatever model you got over here to make it a child of track solid. Now press Shift C on your keyboard and search for Reset PSR. Let's drag it all the way here. Press Escape to close the search window. And with the shoe model selected, click on Reset PSR. So now the shoe has been moved over to match the coordinates of our track solid, but we still can't see it, and that's simply because the model is too small. So let's separate it from the track solid now. Under the coordinates tab, the second column here is where we can change the dimensions of the object. So let's change all X, Y, and Z to a higher number and see what that gives us. Yeah, I think that's too large, so I'm gonna bring it down to 1500. Right, I'm happy with that. I'm just gonna move it a bit higher here, change the orientation to something like this. All right, let's have a look at the scene really quick. Awesome. If you're doing this for the first time, this right here is probably your most exciting moment of the whole thing. You've done everything right, and the 3D model is pretty much a part of the actual video now. Well, obviously it still doesn't match the entire look of the scene yet, and we will work on that in a minute. And guys, if you're enjoying this tutorial so far and wish to see more of this type of videos, consider subscribing to my channel and make sure you join me on Instagram as well as Discord if you wish to have more influence over the future videos. Alright, now before improving the overall look of the scene, first let's get the animation part out of the way. So back to the timeline, and let's go a few frames after the screen tap. Select the shoe object. Let's scale it down. I'll go with 300 on all axes. Next, rotate it, move it down and place it right on top of the screen. You can always use the track solid as your reference here. You can also press on your mouse wheel to reveal other views to make sure the object is positioned right where you want it. Cool, now without changing the time code and with the shoe model selected, navigate over here to Record Active Objects button. If you click on it, you'll notice a tiny white keyframe appearing on the current time code. This means that the current properties of the object have been saved. And now you can go ahead and navigate a few frames forward, around 1 second or so, and this time you want to scale the shoe back up. Let's reposition it back here. I'm gonna rotate it to face this side, and once again click on this red key button to record the changes in a new keyframe. And now because we have created two keyframes apart holding different information, we have motion in between. So let's apply the same principle to animate the hand interaction part. And this is where the background video comes in handy. I'm just going to play through the footage, changing the model's position and rotation, adding a new keyframe each time, and the goal is to simply match the shoe's motion to that of my hand. After setting your keyframes, you can go to Window, Timeline F-Curve. This is where you can manipulate rotation and position curves to make your animation look more natural. If you're familiar with the graph editor in After Effects, you will find this really easy to use as it's very similar to that. But if you're new to this tool allows you to see and edit how the animation moves between the keyframes. The major goal here is to edit how fast every motion starts or stops, making it easier to sync the object behavior to that of my hand. And I will link some resources on this topic down in the description below, so if you guys want to learn more about curves in Cinema 4D, make sure you check that out. Let's have a quick look at the result. Looks great. I'm satisfied with how that turned out. So I think now I'll focus more on the overall look of the model. I want to add a bit of realism and match the 3D object to the rest of the scene, and to achieve that we're gonna need to add some lights. So click over here to create a new light. I want to replicate the natural light coming from my window, so let's move the source to the right side, and with the light selected, under the general tab, let's increase the intensity and change the shadow to shadow maps. Let's add another light, place it on the opposite side, and this time bring the intensity up but keep it lower than the previous light, and set the shadow to shadow maps. So this way we have both a key and a fill light complementing each other from both sides. After that, click and hold render picture view, select interactive render region, and you can use this to preview a selected area. If I make any changes to my light settings here, I can see that updating in real time in the selected region. The color still doesn't match that well, so let's work on that. Add a sky object, right click on it, go to render tags, compositing, select the sky object again, and under the compositing tab, disable scene by camera. Let's make a quick jump back to After Effects and find a frame where most of the scene is visible. Let's hide the track solid for now, set the resolution to full, and head over to composition, save frame as, file, set the output model to TIFF, select a destination. I will save it inside a new folder, give it a descriptive name, and hit render. Back to Cinema 4D, let's create a new material. I'm gonna call this sky, disable this, enable luminance, and then load the frame that you just exported. Click no. Now drag the created material over and drop it on the sky object. And as you can see, the shoe is now a little brighter and the color tone has been changed to match that of the background. Maybe it's not so noticeable here, but you would be able to see the difference on reflective or glossy objects. In my case, I'm not really trying to achieve anything super realistic. Remember, we're adding a hologram effect on this later, so it doesn't have to look perfect at this stage. Let's disable the interactive render region for now, and I actually want the shoe to reflect on the phone screen. So let's create a shadow catcher material, disable catch shadows, and enable catch reflections. Bring the strength down to 30% and apply the new material on track solid. Make it visible to render. Actually, let's enable the render region once again to see how that looks. Looking great, although the reflections seem to be at 100%, but that's gonna be different on the rendered image later. Everything else looks great. I don't want the background video to be rendered, so select the background object and change its visibility in render to off. Alright, what's next? I actually want to be able to separate the shoe from its reflection later in After Effects, just in case I want to apply different edits on each layer. And one way to do that is using object buffers. So first, right click on the shoe object, add a compositing tag, go to Object Buffer tab and enable the first buffer. Next, let's go to Render Settings, a quick check on the output settings. Make sure the frame range starts from 0. My frame rate is 25, so that's all good. Let's enable multipass. Click here and choose Object Buffer. Make sure the ID number matches the one under the compositing tag. Now under Save, let's pick a destination for our render. I'm gonna create a new folder and simply call the file shoe. Change the format to PNG. And remember to enable alpha channel. Next, pick a destination for the object buffer. You can save it in a different location, but I'm gonna go ahead and save it in the same folder. Again, change the format to PNG, and finally go to effects and add ambient occlusion. Now we're all set and ready to render. So to do that, simply click on the render to picture view button, and now we just wait. My PC isn't a beast at all, so it's gonna be a couple of hours for me. Meanwhile, if you drop an eye on your destination folder, you'll see that 2 images have been exported for each frame. One is the final render and the other is a black and white image, which we will then use as a mask to separate the reflection from the actual model.
One eternity later.
Once all the frames have been rendered, we can go back to Adobe After Effects, go to Import, and select the very first frame of your final render. Make sure PNG sequence is enabled and click on Import. Right click on the imported sequence, interpret footage, main, and change the assumed rate to 25. Cool. Once again, let's go to Import, select the very first object buffer frame, enable PNG sequence, import, and same thing here, we need to change the frame rate so it matches our original clip and composition. And now let's bring both sequences inside our main comp. I'm going to rename the object buffer sequence to mask, select the shoe sequence, and change the track matte to Luma matte. Now obviously I don't mean to get rid of the reflection completely, so let's duplicate both sequences. Select the bottom one and change this to Luma matte inverted. As you can see, the reflection isn't perfectly aligned to my screen. I want to take care of that part later, so let's hide the reflection layer for now. Let's have a look at the hand movement first. Obviously you want the hand to cover the shoe here instead of the other way around, and we can fix that with rotoscoping. So select the original clip, duplicate it, and move the copy all the way to the top, rename it to hand, and to speed up the rotoscoping process, you can cut out parts where the hand is not in the frame. So let's go right where the hand exits the frame here, press Ctrl+Shift+D to split the layer. Play forward till the hand appears again and drag the layer's input forward all the way here. Let's go back to the first section, double click to open the layer, select the roto brush, and simply start painting over the hand. Once you let go, you'll see that a purple outline has been drawn around the hand. It probably won't look perfect from the first attempt, but you can still refine that. By holding down Alt, you can use the brush to exclude unwanted parts of the footage. And now if you play forward, the purple outline does a really good job at tracking the hand. But there's always error here and there, so you can keep posing and refining the selection as you play forward. Once you're satisfied with the rotoscope, click on freeze and wait for the process to finish. Now if we solo the hand layer, you can see that everything within the frame apart from the hand has been excluded, which is exactly what you want. The edges still look a bit rough, so let's increase the feather, drop the contrast a bit. I think that looks good enough. And of course, we'll need to apply the same process on the second layer as well. During this part in particular, the hand movement was a bit faster, which resulted in higher motion blur. And that's something that AE struggles with when trying to rotoscope. So keep in mind guys, having unclear or blurry edges will definitely slow your rotoscoping process down. You can always split your layers into multiple sections to avoid having too much lag. It took me a while to rotoscope the second part, so I'm gonna go ahead and speed things up since I'm sure you're familiar with the process by this point. Let's have a look at the result. Great! The hand now covers the shoe as it's supposed to. So now that we got that out of the way, let's focus on the navigation part and create the button which you saw in my original clip. Select the rectangle tool and draw a rectangle somewhere in the middle. Change the fill color to dark gray, or simply use the color picker to sample from the phone. Switch the layer to 3D, place it right below the rotoscoped hand layer, select the track solid, press P to reveal the position property, copy that and paste it over on the button to reposition it. Let's do the same thing for the rotation as well. I'll move it slightly right where the finger taps the screen. Maybe I'll scale it up a bit, but I want the button to come into frame in sync with the image carousel above it. So let's go right where the last image is about to slide in and add a position keyframe. Move the button on X-axis towards the left. Move a couple of frames forward, right where the main image stops, and bring the button back to the center of the screen. Select the second keyframe and apply an easy ease. Enable the graph editor and let's drag this handle towards the left just to ease the animation even further. Alright, that looks perfect. The only issue here is that the button is still visible outside the phone screen and we need to mask that out. So let's duplicate the track solid, move it above the button. You can call it screen mask. I want to resize it to cover the whole screen, just like that. Next, use the rectangle tool to draw a mask around the screen. You might need to readjust the path to match the borders of the screen. And finally, change the button's track matte to alpha. Alright, nice. The masking part is solved. Now let's add some text to the button. My call to action is going to be 360 degrees. Switch the layer to 3D. Move over to where the button animation starts. With the button layer selected, hold Shift and press P, then R to reveal both position and rotation properties. Select both position and orientation and hit Ctrl C to copy. Select the call to action and paste. Press the letter U on your keyboard to reveal the keyframes, and with both selected, you can adjust the path of the animation. Next, duplicate the screen mask layer, move the copy above the call to action, and change the track matte to alpha. Let's have a look at that. Alright, the animation looks fine. Let's enable motion blur on both layers to make it more natural. You can also add some sort of a tap effect on the button. In my case, I just wanted to fade out after the tap. So let's go to that action moment, select both text and button layers. Press T to open up opacity, add a new keyframe, then go a couple of frames forward and change the opacity down to 0. Now select all keyframes and press F9 to apply easy ease. Let's have a quick preview and see how that looks. Perfect. Now let's add some cool reveal effect to the shoe itself. First, go right before the shoe animation starts, select the rendered sequence, and under the effects tab, look for gradient wipe. Let's add that in. Reduce transition softness to 40%. Enable stopwatch on transition completion and set that to 100. Let's move around 10 frames forward and bring the completion down to 0. Let's hit space to play. And just like that, we have a nice shoe reveal animation. Now there's a couple of methods to achieve the hologram effect. In my original video, I used a plugin called Holomatrix. This effect comes with a bunch of ready-made presets you can choose from. However, Holomatrix doesn't come cheap, so let me show you guys another method that doesn't require any external plugins. All you need to do is search for an effect called night vision. Let's add that to our rendered sequence. Disable both solid composite and minimax. Set the noise to 5%. Back to effects, and this time let's add glow. Increase the radius, bring the intensity down a bit, and move the glow effect above the noise. If you want to go a bit more sci-fi, you can add a blue tint effect on the shoe as well, but I'm quite happy with the way it looks right now. Apart from that, I want to add a bit of fake motion blur here, so let's search for pixel motion blur and apply it to the shoe. You'll notice that the shoe layer has some issues right now. No need to panic. In After Effects, the order of your effects actually matters. So to fix that, all you need to do is move the motion blur effect to the top, and there you go. The motion blur we just added makes the animation look more realistic and natural. Now we're not done yet. We're still going to add some light rays that will make the effect look much better. But before that, let me show you guys how I created the 3D loading icon right before the shoe is revealed. Create a new composition, set the dimensions to 300 by 300 and the duration to 2 seconds. Then create a new black solid, which I'm going to call circle. Select the ellipse tool, double click on it to create a circle mask inside. Scale it down. Let's add the saber effect. Under customize core, change the core type to layer masks. Bring the intensity up to 70% or so. Reduce the core size. Next, go to start offset. Enable the stopwatch and change the value to 100%. Move a couple of frames forward. Enable the stopwatch on end size and leave it on 100. Now move to the 1 second mark and bring both offsets down to 0. Press U to reveal keyframes. Let's select all of them and press F9 to easy ease. I think it looks great, but I want to delay the ending a little bit, so let's move this keyframe forward. Let's enable both motion blur and 3D. Set the mode to screen. Next, duplicate the layer and slide the copy a couple of frames forward to delay it. Press R to reveal rotation properties and set the Y rotation to 90 degrees. Now if you change the camera perspective, you can see that we have two circles intersecting, which is going to be our 3D loading icon. So let's go back to the main comp, and from the projects tab, bring the loading composition over and place it below the shoes layer. Enable collapse transformation and convert the layer to 3D. It's still out of sight now, so let's copy the correct position properties over from the track solid as usual. Ctrl V to paste. Let's move it upwards a little bit. Make sure it starts a couple of frames after the tap. Move it to the right slightly. I want to make it a little bit bigger as well. And cool. If you still see the glow borders like me here, you can simply play around with the glow settings to bring the radius down and create a more feathered effect around the edges of the solid. Alright, so now let's go ahead and focus on the light rays. Let's create a new solid, give it a descriptive name, place it right above the shoe layers. Next, under the effects tab, look for optical flares and add that to the new layer. Go to options and under preset browser, look for green spotlight. We still have the ability to customize the flare before applying. So let's hide glint, glow and hoop. Select shimmer and change the color to bright blue. Finally, go back to global parameters and change the aspect ratio to 1.4 and click OK. Let's change the render mode to transparent and the source type to 3D. And just like any other 3D element in our scene, this flare now has X, Y, and Z coordinates. And since we want to place it right on the screen, we can copy the same coordinates from track solid as usual. You can either type that manually or simply paste each value in. I actually want the rays to cover the phone entirely, so let's move it down on the Y-axis. Notice that the flare has another center position property, and this one controls the direction of the rays. Change the scale to 360 and the brightness to 90. Now the flare does track the phone, but it still doesn't look like it's coming out of the screen itself and isn't always pointing towards the shoe. And this is where some manual masking and tracking work is needed. So select the rays layer and draw a mask around the rays. Bring the feather up. Let's enable stopwatch on the mask path. And all you need to do now is keyframe the mask path to follow the screen movement starting from the shoe reveal up until the end of the animation. You can create as many keyframes as needed to make sure the mask tracks both the phone and the shoe movement properly. Another thing we need to keyframe is the center position. So with this stopwatch enabled, I'm simply gonna skip a couple of frames, and each time make sure that the light rays are pointing towards the floating 3D object. Now change the layer mode to overlay, and let's see. Alright, looking great so far. Let's not forget that the shoe only appears at some point, so let's animate the reveal of the light rays as well. Going back to where the shoe animation starts, create a new brightness keyframe, set it to 0, move forward where the shoe is fully revealed, and bring the brightness back up. You can also add a bit of motion to the rays. Simply look for animation evolution, press and hold Alt and click on the stopwatch, and finally change this expression to time times 200. Let's see, we're actually almost done. Let's go back and take care of the reflections real quick. Switch the layer back on, select the reflection sequence together with a mask above it, then go to layer, pre-compose. I'm gonna call this reflection and click OK. Next, bring the track solid above the newly created composition, and using the rounded rectangle tool, create a mask around the screen. You might need to refine the mask here so it matches the screen perfectly. And once you're done, change the track matte of the reflection composition to alpha, and you can also add some keyframes to the mask path just to make sure it doesn't drift away from the screen as we play forward. Once you're done with all that, you can create a new adjustment layer all the way on the top, add the lumetri effect, and here you can play around with the settings to add some color grading to your scene and give it a cinematic look. After that, all that's left to do is to render the composition, and usually I do that with the help of Adobe Media Encoder, as it provides multiple codecs and the output settings are pretty much straightforward and very easy to adjust. And that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial and learned something new. If you did, then don't forget to give this video a like. Consider subscribing if you like to see more content like this one. And if you managed to follow the tutorial till the end, I'd love to see what you guys come up with. So make sure you send me your creations on Instagram or drop it on my Discord server for more people to see. Other than that, stay safe and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.